Hello, and welcome to Tuesday Talks with Mom. I'm Tera Myers, and I am so glad you're here. As part of Moms on a Mission, we're empowering moms across the country to stand up and advocate for their children's educational freedom. As a mom of an adult son with Down syndrome, I've walked this road, navigating the school system and fighting for the right to choose the best education for my child. And now I'm here to share that journey with you. Every 2 weeks, we'll sit down with different moms from around the country and provide thoughtful advice and share our experiences. Together, we're building a community of moms who are finding their voices, taking action, and making a difference. Welcome to Tuesday Talks with Mom.
Hello, Tara,
Hi, Becki.
and hello to all of our friends who are joining us this Tuesday for our Mom Talk. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too, Becki. I'm excited to share tonight.
I am honored to be able to introduce you. I know that you've told snippets of your story, but I first have to tell our viewers that when I first met Tara, I was kind of fangirling because I had been following her on X, and Tara is an OG. Like she has blazed a trail for moms like me. So Tara is in Ohio, I'm in Missouri, and I thought, this is a woman to follow and to model after. So I do, before you get into your story, Tara, I do just want to say, um, talk about the power of one, because that is so important. It is so powerful, and it's something that I think all of our moms need to hear. When one person stands up for what they believe, others follow. Your story matters. And when Tara wasn't believing that others cared about her children, others were watching. So she had to do something. Education is a community effort. You may be standing alone when going against the norm, but your children are worth it. The resources will follow the efforts of many. And it is amazing what can come out of a vision or a dream when effort is applied. And Tara, I just think I have goosebumps. I've been rehearsing that, and I have goosebumps reading it out loud, knowing that those words are going to fall on some of our mama's ears, and they're going to have the same reaction.
Oh,
So
well, thank you.
yeah, so tell us, give us your story.
Wow. First off, I want to say thank you so much for that lovely introduction. That's so sweet. I didn't know that about you. So gosh, I feel very humbled. And it's a little awkward to have those things said about you, but I appreciate it. Thank you, Becki. And I'm so proud of the work that you have done with your daughter in Missouri. And we'll get to that in a little bit. But yeah, the power of one. I've been sharing this talk with a lot of people for several years about how I always felt like I was just a mom in the middle of nowhere, Ohio, wanting an education, feeling like my son deserved an education for my son, and that nobody would care. And then I realized, I was one of many, but it takes one to stand up. And when you do, it's amazing how many others will stand up with you. And this isn't about like being an activist, it's about being an advocate. And I think there's a significant difference. And my son, as we've talked before, he has Down syndrome, he has multiple disabilities. Oftentimes, he needs someone to come alongside him to support him and to help him get his words out. And when it came to education, I was told ahead of time that it was going to be difficult and that they weren't going to give you what you needed and it was going to be a fight. And I was always told, oh, you're a Pollyanna. You just think that what you think is going to happen, that everybody's going to go along with it. And you're going to find out that that's not going to be the case. And so I went into it. I'll never forget the very first IEP meeting at our local district. Everyone said, "Oh, you need to take somebody with you, and they're going to have all these people in there." And I thought, well, if I need to take somebody, maybe I should take everybody. So I remember that very first IEP meeting. I know, you being a former teacher, you're going to appreciate this. I invited everyone. And in fact, we were meeting in this little, it was called the fishbowl, this little room. And I invited all these people, and 16 people showed up on my behalf for the first IEP meeting. And I remember the advocate said, they're not going to give you what you want. This district doesn't do one-on-one aids. They don't do this. They don't do that. And I was meeting with the speech therapist in the McDonald's ahead of time, mapping out our plan. And I said, but what if they do give us what we want? And then she just
Mhm.
said, they won't. They will not give you what you want. And you're going to end up in mediation. And I thought, oh gosh, that just sounds so painful. And I already had so many concerns. And so I went in there and all these people showed up, and I think they were freaked out because they're like, "Oh my gosh, who is this woman and why did she invite all these people to come to this meeting?" In fact, people were standing around the table. It was ridiculous. Anyway, long story short, they did give me everything I wanted in writing. And Becky, I thought, "Oh my gosh, it's all gonna be great." You know,
Yeah.
I didn't have a Pollyanna feeling.
Mhm.
Um, However, just because it was in writing, just because it was on the IEP, just because I thought that I had won, my uphill battle was just beginning, and it was not. We fought at every single turn, and that was the beginning of our story. And I had such high hopes, and I've told people that so many times. I said, you know, I wanted to be that mom. I wanted to be all the things that I dreamed that my mom would have been able to be, you know, the room mother,
Mhm.
throwing all the parties, dressing up for all the events, showing up at everything. And she wasn't able to be there for all those things. I thought, I'm going to do that. You know, I really wanted to be part of the public school system, everything that we ever saw.
Yep.
And it wasn't working out. I didn't want to have to make the decision to make a change. I didn't want to be the one standing up while everyone else was sitting. And, but you know, once you know, you can't sit back down. So
Exactly.
I had to get up and I had to be the one to stand up and to advocate for my son. And as I started that advocation process, I realized I wasn't just a mom in the middle of nowhere. I had a voice. My son and my family had a story, and people did indeed care. And, you know, I tell people all the time, there were these little postcards that were going around about school choice in Ohio, and nothing about individuals with Down syndrome or with any type of disability other than autism. And my girls qualified for school choice options when that was needed. But for my son, there was nothing. And I thought, well, this feels a little discriminatory. And I said, we just this is not okay. And so I made a call to the agency, which was School Choice Ohio. And I called them, and I'll never forget the poor gal that got the phone call. I know she thought, oh, why did I have to answer? And so I poured out my heart and my story. And when I finished, she said, oh my goodness, there's a bill before the House. Would you come down and share your story? And I did. And she helped me, you know, get my words down on paper. And the rest I always say was history, but yet it's not. Because even today, there are still boys and girls all across our state and your state and this nation that
Yep.
don't have school choice options. So you know, those are little snippets of our story. But it was really the standing up and realizing that no one was going to fight for my children as hard or as diligently as I was going to.
Yes, exactly. Moms know their kids best,
Yep,
and moms are going to fight for their kids and other people's kids. I mean, we just get everybody on board that we can.
that's right. You know, if you're in a grocery store and you hear somebody yell mom, every mom stops and looks around.
Yep.
Or if you hear that someone's child went missing, we stop and we go to action. And it's
Yes.
the same thing with what you and I do. And you know, we can't just fight for our own children. I had we had another bill expansion going on in 2023 here in Ohio, and I got up to testify. I went down as just an interested party, and one of the senators said, welcome back, Mrs. Myers. Why is it that you keep showing up? And I said, because there are still moms and dads and children across our great state that do not have options. And what about the moms that are struggling with two jobs, or the mom and dad that are both working? Who's going to speak for them? And I said, again, once you can't sit back down until every child in every state has some form of option or ability to be provided with a quality education. I can't let that go. And like you said, moms know better than anyone else. I recently posted where the Department of Education said parents should be the primary decision makers for their children. And a bunch of comments said, oh, so parents think that they know better than qualified, educated teachers. And I love making this statement to you because you are one of those qualified educated teachers. And my comment was, we're not saying that at all.
No.
Greatest resource I had were those qualified educated teachers who came alongside me. And as I was advocating for my son and trying different options, came along and said, how about you try this curriculum? What if we try this? Let's do that. Or one in particular for my daughter that came to me and said, we cannot meet her needs. I would highly recommend that you send her here. And I thought that is what parents need. They need the greatest seat at the table. I always refer it to driving the bus. I'm like, the proverbial educational bus. Put the parents in the driver's seat, and they will do their due diligence to allow people that are appropriate for their child's education to get on and off the bus. Sometimes we have to break up and we have to say goodbye. And you
Yeah.
know what? It's not the end of anything. It's just the right decision for the child.
Yes.
And yeah, so I mean, you've probably seen that with your own daughter,
Yes.
choices that you've had to make. They can be uncomfortable, but also could be,
Absolutely.
yes, valuable.
Yes. Yeah, it is uncomfortable because we have been told that, especially in the case of our children, Tara, that the public school is the best option for students with disabilities. And that's not always the case. And I know that there are public schools who do a great job of educating children with disabilities or specific disabilities. But it didn't work for my daughter. It did not work for your son. And that's why we continue to fight for freedom, the education freedom across the country.
Absolutely. And yes, somebody once said to me, well, they have more resources. And if you don't leave him in his district, you're going to be giving up FAPE, free appropriate public education. And I looked them square in the eye and I said, that was a hard thing because there were parents back in the 70s that fought so hard to make sure that our children were able to be educated alongside their peers. However, a mother of a child with special needs is not going to give up a free, appropriate public education if it is indeed appropriate.
Right.
And if it isn't, you have to make a decision. And so, we were always able to take our IEP with us. The
Yep.
cool thing about choice is that it becomes a negotiation. It no longer becomes, this is what we're going to tell you you're going to get, like it or
Mhm.
not, whether it's appropriate or not, whether their child is learning or not. But now you get to negotiate because those choice programs, as my experience showed, if I didn't like it there, picked up my child, picked up his resources, and I moved on down the road. And fortunately, we were able to find and create on our place what
Mhm.
worked for him. And I think that parents need to know that there are other parents out there that are fighting too,
Yes.
for the better of the children, not for any particular program, not for any particular resource, but what the parents decide is the most appropriate for their child. And I think you would agree, but correct me if I'm wrong, that it takes a team.
Yes.
And, even though we know our child best, that's my PhD
Mhm.
is my child.
Yep.
He's my life's work. But I'm going to consult with you, the teacher, for how you think that we can link those things up. And then
Yes.
we're going to pull in the speech and language therapist and the physical therapist and all the folks that make this happen, because that is what a quality education is about. It's about a collaboration between those involved for what is best for the children.
Absolutely. And I would like to note this is not just good advice for parents with children with disabilities. This is across the board for parents. Um, there are some programs that or opportunities that may be more appropriate compared to others. I think of our son who is older than Izzy. He wanted to be in a JROTC program, so we decided to put him in the district with where I taught. And I mean that is a form of school choice. That was a perk that the teachers had, was bringing their children to the district with them. And we chose that because the other opportunities for that, they weren't great. And so putting him in the school district with me allowed him to be on a championship winning team with JROTC, and that was life changing. And that was public school as well.
I think that's great. And, my youngest daughter, when it came to private school, high school, she wasn't interested in all the things that high school necessarily had to offer. She was that child when we homeschooled that she'd get up early in the morning. She wanted to be done by noon. She wanted to be an entrepreneur. She wanted to create and delve into that. And she was kind of like the best little homeschooler. And so she wasn't interested in all the things that all the other gals her age were interested in.
Hmm.
But because we had some choice options with the college programs, she was able to complete her classes at school early in the day and then head off to college campus. And she graduated with, I think it was like one class or a class and a half's worth of with an associate's degree. She was one class shy of an associate's degree when she graduated from high school. And it's because she said, this is where my interest level is. When
Yeah.
everybody else wanted to have a study hall or a free period, she wanted to get started on her future. And again, another option for school choice. And again, it's education freedom. It's doesn't mean that you're dissing on your public district. I mean, my goodness, I know so many friends who their children received a quality education in their particular program at their district school. It just so happened that ours weren't.
Right.
And so we had to make other options, but it's by no means an us against them situation. But my story in particular is that, we went from trying to honestly, I wanted to put my kids on the bus, have a cute little backpack and lunch pail that match, send them off to school, volunteer, and do our thing. And then I wanted to go, honestly, build a career. I had other things that
Yeah.
I wanted to do.
Yep.
It never crossed my mind that I was going to be forced to advocate for other options. But having to do that, I realized that nothing that I wanted to do in life measured anywhere near the quality of education that I needed for my children.
Hmm.
That as a mom, that was the decision that I ultimately had to make. So I hope that parents feel that they have a resource in us to be able to reach out and share their stories, get answers for questions that they may have, and
Hmm.
yeah, have an opportunity.
Yes. Yes. Well, Tara, thank you so much for sharing your story. And like I said, I know we've heard snippets of it before, and I just love how it all comes together, and the tremendous work that you're doing with parents all across the country, and just making us feel empowered. That is so powerful. That is so valuable. And so thank you for that.
Thank you, Becky. Thanks for all that you do too. I see that we have a question coming in, so we'll go
Okay.
ahead and see what that is. It says, how did you both feel when you fully exercise your rights as equal team members in advocating for your kids? Becky, I'll let you go ahead and start with that, and then I'll finish with it.
I at first felt like I was being punked after all of the times that I was at the table with administration, with faculty, with all of these people that said they had my daughter's best interest at heart.
Mhm.
And they would say things, and then they would walk it back later, or they would I mean, basically it was lip service. And
Yep.
so when I sat at the table with Izzy's new team at the parochial school, I'm like, they really do have her best interest at heart, and they are listening to me. And I had always felt like, as a public school teacher, that I had an in. Like, I knew what to expect. I knew what to say. I knew the right buzzwords, but that was not enough. And it wasn't until we put Izzy in the parochial school that I'm like, these people understand what I am saying as a mom, as a parent, how much I want her education to be impactful. And that was 9 years ago. And I still have that feeling like they really do want her to have the best education possible.
I love it. Well, you said you felt like you were punked. And I did too. I have to confess, and I'm going to tell parents this, when I found out that I could choose, I was advocating for Sam at the public school. In the process, my second child, his sister ran into some problems and I needed to choose choice for her. And I could not believe I brought them home and schooled them at home. And I really was carrying way too much of a load with Sam's educational needs. And for 3 years, I'm embarrassed to say, for 3 years, I couldn't believe that truly, um, they were going to let me choose the school of choice. I felt like there's no way that they're actually going to do this because everybody kept telling me for years, it's not going to happen. We control all the funds. And you can try to take your children elsewhere, but we control the funds. So when I finally made that decision, I just felt like I had won the lottery. And the cool thing is that several other children that were struggling, parents followed suit. And I remember standing in the hallway with those moms and dads for various reasons. We all had different reasons as to why we had chosen another option, and we cried. And I remember thinking, now if I could just have this option for Samuel. And I cried again when that bill passed and we had the option for Samuel. I had another uphill battle, and that's for another conversation, of actually starting a program in a private school to give him
Mhm.
an education. But I sat on the floor in our vacation condo and sobbed when it passed because I thought, they told me it would never happen. And yet, all that work from everybody, it really did. So I see we have a follow up question. So feel free. And another one.
What are some key takeaways for new moms as they begin this journey? Um, Pros and lessons learned. Tara, you go first.
Key takeaways. Number one, you know your child better than anyone else, and do not let any expert, anybody with letters behind their name, tell you otherwise. Of course, you probably need some assistance coming along the way, but that's what we're all here for. When it comes to education, that is why we have teachers and therapists and coaches and moms to come alongside one another. But you know already what your child needs. Don't ever second guess yourself with that. Going along with that, your gut. Your gut
Yes.
will tell you. Your gut, my son would have never gone to school in the first place if I would have listened to my gut when they were telling me he has to do this or he will never have an opportunity. And my gut was telling me, no, you should probably school him at home. That would probably be the best starting place for him. So listen to your gut. Go ahead.
I am totally on board with all those, Tara. The thing that stands out to me is don't wait. Uh, we had been told we'll catch her up. It'll be
Yeah,
fine. We've got plenty of time. No,
right.
no. Do not accept that as an answer because what happens in kindergarten. I mean, as a mom, in the blink of an eye, they're suddenly in junior high school or high school, and you just cannot wait
Right.
for their education to just kick in at some point. Like, if this is not the right fit, get out,
Yes.
find something else, because we have these children in our homes for such a short amount of time to educate them, and we want to use that time wisely. So don't let them tell you, oh yeah, we'll catch them up. No, find another option.
Exactly. Yes. Do not wait. I love that. Do not wait. We have another question. How can moms in traditional schools better advocate for their children? I love this question, Denisha. You know, go to school board meetings. I say go to school board meetings, talk to your teachers, become your teacher's best friend. Teachers need their, I know that this sounds crazy, but this is one of the things that I did. I took their favorite drink into them at the end of the school day. They're tired, they're thirsty. I would take their favorite beverage in at the end of the day and just say, hey, I just want you to know that for me, being a woman of faith, I'm just praying for you. Is there anything special that you need for tomorrow? Is there anything that you're needing? Sometimes if I saw that they were cleaning up their classroom, I'd help empty the trash can or clean up some things. Become friends with your children's teachers. Respond to their emails. Ask them questions. Respect their time. Because I think that you can advocate for your children by knowing what's going on in the school. And the other thing that I did, Becky, is that um, I would get to know the secretaries. Not all the secretaries are
That's a
going to be
good
your
tip.
friend, but the secretaries are going to give you the ins and outs of what's actually going on. And
Mhm.
when we finally made our decision to pull Samuel, and after I had already exercised my right to review his folder, which took me 4 days to review every page of his folder, and it was 8 hours a day. But I had to set myself outside the office once. That secretary would say, all right, this is when the director of special ed is in, and she's going to say she's not here, but you go ahead and sit there. And so I'd take my little baby with me, my little 2 year old, and she and I sat outside that door, and the secretary came by and said, I've given her 2 cups of coffee. She's going to have to come out and use the restroom pretty soon. And sure enough, after 2.5 hours, she showed up. And, if it wouldn't have been for that secretary, I would have never gotten that meeting and I would have never gotten that information. So that's how I kind of buttered up. I tried to be everybody's friend, and it did get me some places. And then finally in the end, I had to make a different decision. How about you, Becky?
As a teacher, I appreciate your advice to get to know the teacher and to also realize teachers are not the enemy.
Right.
Um, Teachers generally do want your students to succeed and want your input because we know that you know your children best. And so we want, if there's something that we want to know or that we need to know, we want to know. And I, I know my level was junior high. That was where I taught. And by the time parents and students got to junior high, they were kind of sick of the system and didn't really I wasn't getting a lot of coffee at the end of the day. But I get it. Like now that I've seen the system and how tiring it can be, um, I get it. But I do want parents to know that teachers, for the most part, really do want your students to succeed. So tell us what you think we need to know with your student in the classroom.
I would echo that. And as a follow up on that right there, your teachers will go to bat for you, but oftentimes I think their stronghold, there's like a stranglehold on what they can and can't do. And where my breakdown came was with the administration.
Yes.
And so I would make choices to go to bat for the teachers. I remember they came to me with a list of resources. They knew that I was talking to the administration and fighting for Samuel. And they said, is there any way that in your quest for resources for Sam, would you ask for these things too? And I said, oh, sure. Give me the pages. And I remember going in there once with 6 requisition forms, 6, and they were filled out top to bottom. And they said, if you could just get us one of these. And I said, okay. And I went in there and I sat and I sat and I sat. And she kept saying, okay, Mrs. Myers, we're done. I said, no, we're not. I just kept pushing the paper across the table. And I said, we're not done. And she just kept saying, why are you at? I said, because in order for this teacher to be able to teach my son, she needs to be able to teach her other students. And she
Yes.
said, well, it's not your job to advocate for everyone else. And I said, but my son is a student in that classroom. And if she's worn out and tired and doesn't have what she needs for the other students, how is she going to be able to give him what he needs? And I
Yes.
remember I sat there and sat there and sat there. And I walked out with all 6 forms signed and dotted. And the teachers threw me like a personal coffee party. They're like, how did you do that? I said, I don't know. I have the patience of Job sometimes,
Yeah.
So yes. Okay, we have one more question, I believe. What is the first step you should take if you feel like your child isn't getting the services that they should be getting? Becky, I'm gonna let you start with this one and then I'll close
Okay.
up on this one. Okay.
Okay. So the first step that I took, I talked with the teacher. I did um, I started using email later, and I do regret that. I wish I would have started emailing at the beginning because emailing provides that documentation. So
Yes.
instead of saying, "Well, this person told me this," an email would have the actual words. And so I would encourage parents to absolutely have the conversation face to face, but either follow up with an email or say, per our conversation, this is what we discussed and I just want to make sure we're on the same page. But having that documentation will be valuable down the road if you feel like you're still not getting the services that your children need. So I would start with that.
I love it. Yes, the first step is I totally echo what you said, Becky. The paper trail. I became notorious. I would actually even walk in and I would write everything down as we started talking. And then I would follow up with an email. And I became, which I've gotten away from this, but I was really good at it. The CC, copy everybody. Everybody was informed about what was going on. They hated that. But it was really important so that nobody could blame it on anyone else. That's what I found the system did for me. But talk to the first person, the first line of defense, and then I would notify them, I'm going to the administration. And I would always request a meeting, and then request it in writing and give the dates. I, at the time, knew that whose rights are they? Whose idea is this that was given?
Mhm.
The federal IDEA law. I had that thing memorized. And so I would chapter and verse, go in there and follow to a T. But I would never go in there with, the guns loaded and brazen, but it was always a conversation and then notification. I'm going to go ahead and
Yes.
follow up with an email, and here's the timeline that we need to follow. And keep in mind too, parents, just because you send it and just because it's law doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to follow it. So you are the one who keeps that bus rolling down the road. Follow up, follow up, follow up. If you get to day 25 of 30 and you haven't heard anything, a nice little reminder is
Yes.
good. I
Yep.
got to the point in that first step where I would talk to the teacher, talk to the administrator, email everyone, and then leave a voicemail. And the texting was not in the wheelhouse at the
Right.
time. But I would leave a voicemail for everybody. So I covered all the bases because I didn't want to, assume that somebody got the email or that they got the call. I just figured I'm just going to blanket affect it.
Yeah.
Uh, and again, kindness, words of kindness always go a long, long way. Um,
Yes.
After 4 years is when I started getting a little cranky, and they were shocked. They were like, "Oh my gosh, you're such a nice mom. And all of a sudden you raised your voice." I said, "Oh, you haven't heard me at home the last 4 years." So save that for later. Always go in with kindness. That's why the
Yes.
coffee is good. You can offer them a nice little beverage. So
Yes.
I want to thank everybody for coming on tonight. I hope that
Yes.
you were able to get some good words of wisdom and some ideas, tips, and techniques. If you didn't, or you had a question that didn't get answered or that we didn't get to, please feel free to email us at Tera Myers School Choice at gmail.com, or visit one of our other links. And you're welcome to reference today's call. We've got this link posted on Facebook and X. You're welcome to message us there. We look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks with another discussion with Moms on a Mission.
Yes. Thank you, Tara.
Thank you, Becky.